Guilty.
Senator Tim Scott explains his duty as a juror and breaks down the holes in the House Democrats' arguments. Plus, senior White House impeachment advisor Tony Sayegh joins me to discuss the president's strategy in defending himself.
You've never had a Republican president raise this much from the everyday American citizen.
And co-chair of the Republican National Committee discusses Trump's unprecedented fundraising efforts, along with the new ad campaign. That and so much more.
You elitists with your geography and your maps.
Right now on America This Week. Welcome to America This Week. It's the hottest new political show sweeping America. I'm Eric Bolling. America This Week is all about holding the mainstream media and the powerful accountable by following the money and asking those tough questions they just don't want to be asked. Hypocrisy is the subject of the Talking Points memo tonight. Hypocrisy runs deep in the political class and those who feed off them here in the swamp. Hypocrisy is defined as a pretense of having a virtuous character that one does not really possess. In other words, every politician in D.C. We love highlighting hypocrisy in politicians because it's so darn easy, and they really think we won't call them out on it. Take, for example, the impeachment trial of President Donald J. Trump. The House, led by their Speaker Nancy Pelosi and their Judicial Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler, are hell-bent on removing the president, even though there are 0 Republicans who voted to do so. Therefore, this is an attempted impeachment along party lines, purely partisan. But Pelosi wasn't always so willing to impeach a president this way.
Today, the Republican majority is not judging the president with fairness, but impeaching him with a vengeance.
Nor was Jerry Nadler. In fact, in 1998, the Clinton impeachment, a much heftier Nadler argued the exact opposite of what he's saying now.
There must never be a narrowly voted impeachment or an impeachment substantially supported by one of our major political parties and largely opposed by the other. Such an impeachment would lack legitimacy.
Total hypocrisy, folks, and it continues. The impeachment articles, the basis for the Democrats' complaint against Trump is the Ukrainian phone call. The Democrats say Trump used U.S. military aid to get something of value in return, or quid pro quo. Problem they have is that no thing of value was exchanged because Biden was never investigated, and the aid flowed within days of the phone call. So no quid and certainly no pro quo. Now let's do the Democrats.
I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Now that is exactly real quid pro quo. Vice President Biden, speaking on behalf of President Obama, offered $1 billion in aid. That's quid. For the Ukrainian Inspector General's head on a pike. That's pro quo. You may wonder why the VP was so aggressive with the Ukrainians. Turns out that very Inspector General was investigating Burisma Oil and Gas, the company Vice President Biden's own son questionably sat on the board of. That's more pro quo than a Greek tragedy. And $1 billion, that's a whole lot of quid, Joe. Or how about when President Obama was caught on a hot mic offering to remove a missile defense system from Poland? The deal was struck with Putin's right-hand thug, Dmitry Medvedev.
This is my last election for you. Yeah, and after my election, I have more flexibility.
I'm quoting here. I'll give you what you want, pulling our planned missile defense system from Poland, if you just keep quiet until after the upcoming election. Obama was literally using the safety of Eastern Europe as barter for Russia to stay quiet until Obama, gets reelected. A very, very dangerous game of quid pro quo. Just ask Poland or our other NATO allies behind that defense system. Unfortunately, it's not just these high-level politicians. There's a string attached to just about every representative and senator's vote here in D.C. And get this, it trickles down to advisors and even their aides. Everybody here seems to have a price in D.C. The strings can be followed back to piles of money looking to buy a vote or a regulation in order to get an advantage for their group or their company, or very alarmingly, for a foreign government. I've told you this before, but it's worth mentioning again. The swamp thrives on quid pro quo, day in, day out, thousands of times a week. I promise you this is going on. From the minute they arrive here, elected officials in D.C. have one thing on their mind. That's their own reelection. Remember, elections cost big money. So every meeting, every dinner, every conversation has some sort of thing of value attached to it. That's almost always tied to a campaign donation in some form. I'll vote for that water right to help your paper plant. Just do me a favor, donate to my campaign so I can vote for it again. All day long, folks. Problem is, when these people go on TV and get all holier than thou, they're on the record and on tape. Somehow they forget, or worse, they don't care that we can call up a video of when they were adamantly against things they're adamantly for now. Total, unadulterated hypocrisy. Our political class in America is steeped in it. I'm sure this will tick a lot of these guys off. No offense, Nancy, Chuck, Jerry, Adam, and the rest of the DC hypocrites. I don't care. I don't work for you. You work for us. Remember? President Trump's impeachment trial has entered a new phase. Senators acting as jurors are doing the grilling. Sinclair's chief political correspondent, Scott Thuman, has the very latest. Scott.
Senators getting their turn in another rare moment not often seen on Capitol Hill.
An answer should be kept to 5 minutes or less.
Senators had to write down their questions, some say to avoid any grandstanding or moments choreographed for the cameras, which Chief Justice John Roberts then read and posed to Democratic House managers or Trump's lawyers.
The President's counsel argues that there was no harm done, that the aid was ultimately released to Ukraine. What is your response?
It actually undercut Ukraine's ability to negotiate with Russia.
Questions are likely to cover the so-called whistleblower. What was Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, doing overseas on the president's behalf? And how about the business dealings of Joe Biden's son, Hunter? Though most instead seemed fixated on Friday, when they'll revisit the controversial idea of calling in witnesses.
It's an uphill fight, as I've always said, but the public is on our side, and truth, above all, is on our side.
President Trump, in a tweet Wednesday morning, referred to the earlier House hearings and implored GOP senators to block new testimony. Remember, Republicans, he wrote, the Democrats already had 17 witnesses. We were given none. Witnesses are up to the House, not up to the Senate. Don't let the Dems play you. The reporting right now is that the GOP doesn't have the votes necessary to prevent more witnesses. But first things first, these question and answer sessions could go up to 16 hours, spread over Wednesday and Thursday combined. On Capitol Hill, I'm Scott Thuman for America This Week. Eric, back to you.
Thank you, Scott. He's a senior White House impeachment advisor. Tony Sayegh is here with us. Tony, welcome. First time to the show. Good to have you on.
Great to be with you.
Tell us about this senior impeachment advisor. Is that a new role? That carved out from the White House?
Well, look, obviously impeachment is a big issue, and no matter whether or not that's going on, it's always difficult in the White House because we have so many different issues to keep up with the big portfolios that the existing team already has.
So you're actually getting involved in the nitty-gritty of the defense, the whatever you call it,
sure.
President Trump's side.
So I came in on a temporary basis to help the president, to support him and the team in the White House that already was there working on the issue, from the White House counsel's office to our legislative affairs team, because we obviously also wanted to make sure we were still able to do the American people's work. Think about the fact that in the last month alone, Eric, what have we accomplished? A phase 1 trade deal with China, a United States-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, a major defense bill, the NDAA. The economy's never been better. Our job market's the best in 50 years. This is all because the president's actually been able to focus on his job instead of impeachment.
You brought in a couple of lawyers late in the game. You brought Dershowitz on. We had him on, I believe, last week or the week before. And you brought another lawyer on. How does that work with the existing set of lawyers? And they're getting involved. I see Dershowitz on a lot.
Sure. So the White House counsel's team has been working on oversight all year especially once the House Democrats got into the majority. Once impeachment came, I think a lot of the focus from the White House counsel's office was on that. They have 40 amazing attorneys with a broad set of backgrounds, from prosecutorial offices to corporate law to constitutional law and litigators. They were prepping and working on the case from the very beginning. We obviously knew, though, once this became something that went to the trial.
Does the boss come down and sit in on any of those meetings?
We obviously don't discuss internal deliberations, particularly ones that involve the president, but clearly the president has a very strong opinion, as he should. He's been completely treated unfairly by the Democrats and this whole process.
I want to go to the process. Since you mentioned process, Tony, I want to go to the process. And now in America, we have this innocent until proven guilty. You know, I was watching Fox earlier this afternoon. Senator Tammy Duckworth, now listen, she's a war hero. She's a lieutenant colonel, lost both of her legs fighting for this country. Love her. I don't think she really understands the way it works in America, though. Watch.
I can only speak for myself, and I think that we should be able to see evidence of the president's innocence, because he's asserted his innocence, but so far what I've seen has been pretty damaging evidence from the White House.
She almost makes the case that he has to prove he's innocent rather than what the standard is in due process is you have to prove guilt before.
Again, with all due respect to the senator, who I personally respect for certain, that's not how our system of jurisprudence works in America. It's innocent until you're proven guilty. The rights and fairness is really so the accused has a fair trial. It's been completely warped. When the House process took shape that Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi put on the president, they wanted to take away his due process rights, our right as a White House to exert executive privilege, and they completely controlled the entire process, and still were not able to come up with the evidence in the 17 witnesses that they were able to bring forward to make a strong case for impeachment. They advanced two of the weakest articles, and you said something in your monologue, Eric, that's very important. The American people have to understand this. This is the first and only impeachment in history that passed the House with strictly one party voting for it. In fact, the only bipartisan aspect of this impeachment was the opposition against it. You have a Congressman Fran Drew from New Jersey, who switched parties. Tulsi Gabbard, running for president as a Democrat, abstained to even vote on either of the two articles. People understand that there's no case, and it's collapsing on itself as it's proceeded into the Senate trial.
Tony, 4 senators are running for president. Likely, well, obviously one of them will go up against President Trump. They will be part of the jury. What do you think? Does your side think that they should be pulled out of the jury or the Senate pool to be voting on whether or not their future opponent, likely future opponent, is guilty or not?
Well, look, they're senators. They're allowed to engage in this process. I don't think we're going to get much help or sympathy from them, and certainly not any sort of objective analysis. The bottom line remains, though, Eric, if you look how we've argued this case, we're arguing on the facts and on the evidence presented by the Democrat witnesses themselves. And on those facts and on the evidence, the Democrat case fails. On the process and on the unfairness of the process,
I only have half a minute.
Fails.
Tell me about Adam Schiff.
Look,
how do you do?
Look, I think if you just see the split screen, Adam Schiff has been discredited. He's been lying about the president since the Mueller report, where he said he had evidence of Russia collusion, which never was produced. He's been lying throughout this entire impeachment process. He has no credibility. He's a political hack, and I think the American people know it. And what have we put up on our side? Real legal scholars. Alan Dershowitz, Patrick Philbin, the deputy White House counsel, who's been arguing incredibly effectively. Pat Cipollone, our White House counsel. Eric Hirschman, a lot of great people on our
We're going to leave right there. Tony Sayegh, thank you very much. Good luck, my friend. Speak to you
Eric.
again soon. I'm sure we're going to have you back on very soon.
Great to be with you.
America. And we go now to South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. Senator, thank you very much for spending a few minutes on America this week. Again, we blanket the state of South Carolina and the rest of the country. So just give us a sense, rather than whether or not there should have been witnesses or not, let's talk about who made their case. We talked about the House, they're basically the prosecutors, and the defense, Trump. Who made the better case in your mind?
There's no question that the president's team did a fantastic job of presenting the information that was necessary to come to the conclusion that the president was innocent of an impeachable offense, without any question. You look at the 2 articles of impeachment, and without a doubt, the House Democrats, the managers, did not fully make a case. That is why they have been talking about bringing in more documents and more witnesses, because they simply have not made the overwhelming, undeniable, emphatic case that they said they had at the beginning of this process. It was really, once again, a charade against the American people. Eric, you got to think back too. Sometimes we think in a silo, and that's okay. But the truth of the matter is, if you think back to the Russian investigation, where they had $32 million, hundreds of subpoenas, hundreds of witnesses, the FBI and other agencies working to figure out what went wrong and was the Trump campaign involved. With that as a backdrop, to then move to a process of impeachment that simply continues this malignancy in Washington to try to find a way to eliminate President Trump from being in office, not just for 2016, but to take him off the ballot in 2020. That is ridiculous. Let the American people decide.
Senator, maybe for our audience, maybe the process is interesting, or maybe they don't understand the process completely.
Yes.
So you have the prosecution, which is the House Democrats, by and large the managers, the defense, which is Trump. You are the jury. The Senate is the jury listening to the case, and John Roberts, Supreme Court Justice, is the judge. But here is, and you will end up being the judge as well. You'll make your decision. But here's the question. Is there a presumption? Is there a presumption of innocence prior? In other words, in a regular jury, in a regular trial, the person, the defendant, is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Is it the same standard in this kind of trial?
100%, Eric. I've said that several times. I'm glad you brought that up because it may be one of the more important or salient points that seems to be missing on the Democrat side. The presumption of innocence is as American as apple pie and baseball. Bottom line is simply this. We don't have to prove that the president is innocent. They have to prove that the president is guilty. Let me say this, though, because this is really important. Having read the transcript dozens of times, the president is innocent of an impeachable offense. That is something that is clear as a bell. I will say that the fact that they have the extra weight on their side to prove his guilt, that does not take away from the fact that when you read the transcript, you cannot walk away from the transcript and say the president was guilty of an impeachable offense.
Now, you're going to need somewhere around 20 Republican senators to vote to impeach, to confirm, to impeach the president, get him out of office. Likely not going to happen, yes. Senator. Now, any question in your mind if, in fact, the Senate goes ahead and acquits President Trump of impeachment this time, that we're not going to see another round of impeachment 2.0 in the House and maybe back in your lap again down the road?
I would not be surprised if we faced another impeachment trial this year. Without any question, the Democrats' desire to impeach the president started late November 2016. One of the first headlines in January of 2017 in the Washington Post was talking about impeaching President Trump. So from my perspective, this has been his entire time in office, and it will continue until he leaves office, hopefully in another 4.5 years. So the truth is that the Democrats continue to realize they can't beat him at the ballot box, so they look for another way to win.
All right, Senator Tim Scott, thank you very much for your time.
Good to be with you, Eric.
He's the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. Tommy Hicks is here with us. Welcome, Tommy. I think it's the first time on the show.
It is, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We will talk all things 2020. But first I want to get to something that was really kind of alarming and disturbing. Now, mind you, Don Lemon is a friend of mine. Know him a long time. And I may have a different take on some of this stuff. But there was an instance where he and Rick Wilson, who used to be Republican, I think he still claims he's a Republican, and a reporter from the New York Times, had a little fun yucking it up at the expense of pro-Trump supporters. Tell us about it.
Well, it's deplorables 2.0. You know, the American people understand that the media live in a bubble here in Washington and in New York City, and everywhere you go around our country, Americans' lives are better and better and better because the economy is flourishing. You got record low unemployment. Wages are rising. It's a great thing.
Yeah, and they use it to kind of blast Trump supporters. They're laughing. Rick Wilson is there, making some sort of slangy commentary like, "Oh yeah, well, how about all those lines on the map?" Like Trump supporters are dumb and stupid. But you're using that. The RNC is now using that clip as a fundraiser.
Well, I was offended, and I think the American people are as well. And yes, we will use that to raise money because the president's doing a great job for the American people, and they understand that.
Yeah, and what else? What else are you going to use? I mean, so you have some pretty quirky things that you fundraised on. You have straws for a while, the plastics, just all plastic straws. I mean, you're taking it right at the PC culture, aren't you?
Well, and those sold out very quickly. But yeah, absolutely. Things have gone so far out of whack, out of the mainstream. Yes, the president stands up for what America has traditionally been, and he's going to keep doing that, and the American people appreciate that.
You know, we had Corey Lewandowski on last week, and he said that you're likely going to raise somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion together between the campaign and the RNC, right? You combine the funds. That's unprecedented.
Well, the market speaks. Look at the president's track record. Look at what we've been able to accomplish in 3 short years. Most presidents will be thrilled to accomplish what he's accomplished in a full 8 years.
So tell us, when you're going on a fundraising trip, what's your pitch?
Look what the president's been able to accomplish. Look how far to the other side, to the left, the Democrats have gone. Look at all the candidates on the Democrat platform, on the debates stage. Look what they're talking about.
Where's the money coming from?
The money's coming from small dollar donors. They're coming from everyday Americans. I think our average donation is $40.60. These are the American people who understand the president's fighting for them, and they want to fight with the Americans.
So our folks know, you want the lower number that you could possibly get. That means more people are supporting the president.
Yes, and you've never had a Republican president raise this much from the everyday American citizen who care for our country, know he's fighting for them, and they want to fight alongside of him.
What'd you say, Tommy, to those who say, well, what is this, a money-raising contest? I mean, that's unfortunately, that's what D.C. politics are now, money-raising contests. You know, we're talking maybe a $3 billion election.
Well, you need resources to run a great campaign, and our campaign is going to be amazing. We're going to have over 2 million volunteers trained all over the country, making phone calls, knocking on doors. We've already got over 500,000 people signed up and trained, ready to go. And this is 10 and a half months out. This is outstanding. This is going to be the most prolific presidential campaign in history.
Now, before you came along, the RNC, when Donald Trump candidate was trying to become Donald Trump nominee, and then furthermore Donald Trump president, he had a little pushback from the RNC. I mean, Priebus and Spicer didn't love the candidate, honestly. So they at one point thought about not supporting him. You guys are all in on Trump.
The Republican Party has never been as unified as it is right here and right now, and it's great to watch. In 2016, it was the most historic election of all time, and now we've actually gotten organized behind this great president, and so it's going to be a great thing. We are going to absolutely blow it out in November of 2020.
There it is. There is Tom Hicks. He's the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. Gotcha. Tommy, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Ahead on America This Week, in his own words, we hear from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. You don't want to miss this.
Did you get him?
This week, exclusive. Just after He met with President Trump at the White House this week. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sat down in the historic Blair House for a probing one-on-one interview with Sinclair's own James Rosen. Here are portions of this groundbreaking interview you won't see anywhere else.
Do you consider that effectively, right now, Iran is engaged in that breakout dash for a nuclear weapon?
It's trying to enrich enough uranium for to have the core for one bomb, but it was in a position when the nuclear deal was enacted, it was in a position to wait and develop advanced centrifuges under the deal, and within a few years, now it's about 3 years, 4 years, they would have unlimited capability to produce unlimited amounts of uranium with an unlimited amount, hundreds of thousands of centrifuges, and therefore to be in a position to have an arsenal, a huge arsenal of nuclear weapons.
But are they engaged in a breakout dash toward a nuclear weapon?
I would say a walk. A walk. They're not dashing yet.
Do you regard that the regime in Iran subscribes to the Cold War doctrine of mutually assured destruction?
Yeah, I don't think it's mutually assured. They want our destruction. They openly, they deny the Holocaust, they vow to destroy Israel, and they want to produce an arsenal of nuclear weapons for that.
I understand that, but in other words, they know that Israel has nuclear weapons. They know that were they to launch certain kinds of or scales of attack against Israel, they would face potential retribution, nuclear retribution from the Jewish state. So do you believe that they are susceptible to the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, and that they would act rationally under that doctrine?
Well, I'm not going to talk about our capabilities, and you can assume whatever you wish, but I would say that when it comes to radical Islamists, you can never be sure that the sober calculation of cost and benefit, which you think would work, would necessarily work in all circumstances. You could have suicidal regimes. I don't remember the communists, the Soviet Union producing many suicide bombers, but I see that the radical Shiites and radical Sunnis produce hordes of them, and you never know if there isn't this suicidal trait in the radical regime in Iran. That's why you should not have a radical Islamic regime with nuclear weapons.
We're about to see in March the third election there in roughly a year's time.
Tell me about it.
To outside eyes, they see a figure of your stature, someone of your political savvy, and someone who at times has demonstrated dominance over the political culture in his country, now struggling over a year's time to win these elections and form governments. Should we see Benjamin Netanyahu sort of the way people saw Muhammad Ali in his last fights, as a fighter of diminished capability?
Well, since I'm finishing 14 years, the longest serving Prime Minister of Israel, I must have something left in me. I think we brought Israel to a great place, but now we have the opportunity to do even greater things.
But to what do you attribute the difficulties you find yourself in these days, where the Benjamin Netanyahu of 10 years ago, say, wouldn't have found himself in this situation?
Well, we're pretty much at the same place where we were, but one of our coalition partners on the right moved to the left, that's all.
I understand that you deny these charges, that you deny any criminal wrongdoing. You've used terms fairly similar to the ones we've heard domestically from President Trump about the investigations into your conduct being, as you would describe, a witch hunt, a hoax, and so forth. Short of acknowledging any criminal wrongdoing, do you regard that you made a mistake in some form or fashion in this conduct?
Actually, I think the great mistake is the attempt to criminalize politics. That's what we see in Israel. That's what we see in many other democracies. You have the attempt to, you can't win against candidates, so what you do is you bring charges against them. And this is what we see in country after country, and that's a great danger to democracy. Quite independent of the fact that I'm affected, my family is affected. It's the voters who vote for me, and they say, we can choose, we'll decide who will be prime minister. Obviously there are courts, we can prove or disprove, are innocent, and I have no question about that in my case.
If you had these things to do over again, would you do them differently?
Well, I'd bring to light the kind of things, the kind of twisted procedures that are being used against me and were used against others, as it turned out earlier. Oh, by the way, I smoked cigars. That's a crime. I received cigars from friends. That's a crime. Is that a crime, James? That's crazy.
Maybe to your health insurer.
Well, my wife says it's not a good idea to smoke cigars.
I want to draw your attention to an episode in 2015 when you were running for re-election. And the State Department and then a number of political operatives who were closely associated with President Obama went to Israel and worked with groups there that, let's just say, were not sympathetic to your candidacy at that time. Do you regard that President Obama was engaged in a form of election interference in Israel at that time?
I think there were certain preferences. The fact that State Department money was used, that was clearly inappropriate. But I think we don't live in a pristine world, and governments have their interests. They usually express it in one way or the other. And they did, in my case, against me.
Tell us about the origins of your relationship with President Trump, who was then just Donald Trump.
He was never just Donald Trump. He was the Donald, I remember him as a very dominant presence during my time as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. Yeah, we bumped into each other here and there. I found over the years that he can cut right to the chase. He gets right to the important point. He's totally immune to political correctness, which I find very refreshing. And he's been a magnificent friend of Israel. I don't think we've ever had a greater friend in the White House than Donald Trump.
Do you ever see yourself retiring?
Yeah, sure. Of course. But not before 20 years or so.
Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's hear from both sides of the aisle here, going head-to-head. Political commentator Amisha Cross and former Deputy Assistant to President Trump, host of America First on Salem Radio, and author of his newly released book, The War for America's Soul, our good friend Dr. Sebastian Gorka. All right, control room, roll that footage. Watch.
Donald Trump couldn't find Ukraine on a map if you had the letter U and a picture of an actual physical crane next to it. He knows that this is, an administration defined by ignorance of the world.
And so, Sebastian, that goes on for 80 seconds. The two of them, and there's a New York Times reporter on the screen left over there also weighing in, making fun of the Trump supporters. What say you?
It wasn't me who came up with it, Eric, but somebody on my Twitter feed said, Don Lemon just got Donald Trump reelected. And think about it, that was Saturday night, that egregious, they talked about the ignorant rube base that elected Donald Trump. It's 3 days later, and the RNC has already turned it into a campaign ad. That tells you everything you need to know. These people have Trump derangement syndrome, and they haven't looked themselves in the mirror for 3.5 years. It's just getting worse.
Yeah. So, Amisha, we had Tommy Hicks on there from the RNC co-chair, and he showed us the ad that they're raising money on this. This reminds me of Hillary's deplorables comment in 2015.
I feel like Democrats in this case, Don Lemon, I'm not going to say that this is Democrats on the whole, gave fuel to the fire for a lot of the Republican argument. It's tragic to watch. I think that it was a grave misstep on his part, not only in terms of journalistic integrity, but also in terms of sectioning off a large portion of the American population. At any point, we know that the president has gone after Don Lemon personally. He has attacked him in tweets and all those other things, and has made his disdain for CNN known worldwide. But I think that there is a point where you have to stand above the pale, because you cannot attack back in that way, and specifically attacking voters. This wasn't even an attack on the president as much as it was.
I hate the what if stuff, but can you imagine if it was Trump or any other white politician making, mocking a group by using slangs and a dialect and that kind of twang? Boy, would they get beaten up.
It's a hard thing, and my biggest issue here with him is that the Democratic Party right now is trying to win back voters who voted for Obama and then voted for Trump in the last election. So you're also attacking those people. So it makes it harder for the Democratic candidates who are actually campaigning on trying to bring those voters back.
Let's be clear, this is the same Don Lemon who not too long ago, and he never apologized for this, actually said on his show, the biggest problem with America today is white men. Again, imagine, Eric, If you said that about black men in America, you wouldn't have a show. You would be dead in the water. You wouldn't have advertising.
Sebastian, that was in the context of nationalist racism as well.
Oh, it was like the way he did. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear what my guests were saying. So why did you keep congratulating them and saying that was really good? Ha ha ha. That wasn't an apology, Eric. He meant it.
Last thought.
We also have to think about the voters across the South. I was born in Chicago, but I was raised in the South. At the end of the day, when you're mocking people's accents, when you're talking about maps and things like that, that's insulting to a large swath of people. And I think that for Don Lemon, the apology definitely was necessary. It's hurtful that it took so many people to tweet out for him to do it, but...
You know where I am on this, right? You watch the show. I wasn't offended by any of it, but I'm also not offended the other way. If you're going to do it, be consistent. Don't get mad at conservatives if they poke fun at someone on the other side, but then don't give Democrats a pass if you're taking a shot at Trump or Trump voters. Just relax, everyone. Everyone just calm the heck down. Ahead, Impulsive America, a battle is brewing between two states. How abortion laws have now led to travel bans between them. And the coronavirus from China continues to spread, with more cases reported in the U.S. The fears from one couple with family at the heart of the outbreak and their efforts to help overseas. Chances are, since you woke up this morning, the number of people globally infected with the coronavirus has risen. But first, in our Pulse of America, a battle is brewing between California and Oklahoma. Oklahoma's governor issued an executive order banning state-funded travel to California. That's because California banned state travel to Oklahoma over the state's anti-abortion laws. Erica Stanish with Sinclair station KOKH breaks down what it means for Oklahoma.
Governor Stitt says this all comes down to a disagreement over abortion, and he says he's happy to return the gesture on behalf of Oklahoma's pro-life stance. Oklahoma Republican Governor Kevin Stitt prohibiting state employees from all non-essential travel to California, with exemptions to Department of Commerce employees traveling for business recruiting. The executive order comes nearly 2 years after California banned their state-funded travel to Oklahoma over state law here. That law allowing private adoption agencies to deny adoption for religious or moral reasons, including denying to gay couples. In response, Stitt said enough is enough, saying if a state is going to ban travel here, he's going to reciprocate.
It's that simple. This is something that they banned because of our values in Oklahoma. And so we're proud of our pro-life stance, and I don't want to spend state dollars I don't want to spend state dollars back in California if that state's is going to refuse to spend dollars in our state.
There are more exemptions to the ban than just the Department of Commerce. That includes state college athletes and teams traveling for games, school groups, and business recruiting trips by state officials. House Democrats have weighed in on the move, calling it a distraction from the governor's fight with tribal gambling here, going on to say that playing games with California will not get us to a top 10 state. For America This Week, I'm Erica Stanish. Eric, back to you.
Thank you, Erica, and KOKH. California bans travel to nearly 12 states, not just Oklahoma. Rich Rodriguez with Sinclair station KMPH in Fresno has details of why state lawmakers there say that is a good thing.
Since 2017, California has taken a stand against states that pass what the Golden State considers discriminatory laws. Oklahoma wasn't the first state to be singled out by lawmakers under the Capitol Dome in Sacramento. It is the 9th state to be blacklisted out of 11.
We appreciate that the legislature of California in 2018 said Oklahoma is doing things that hurts LGBT Americans in Oklahoma. We should not be supporting that.
California Attorney General Xavier Becerra cites 2 reasons why the Sooner State is off limits for state-funded or state-sponsored travel. He says the law enacted in Oklahoma allows discrimination against LGBT children and aspiring LGBT parents who must navigate the adoption process. He adds California taxpayers are taking a stand against bigotry. Politics in California are liberal, to say the least, and it seems things won't be changing anytime soon. Democrats have a supermajority in both houses. The breakdown in the Assembly, 61 to 18 Democrats. In the state Senate, it's 29-11 Democrats. Jeffrey Robinson heads up Community Link, one of the longest-running LGBT organizations in Central California. He's a native Oklahoman who questions their governor's motives.
Those folks in Oklahoma have a right to say where they want their taxpayer money spent. And although this is an executive order that to me really appears like maybe it's a smokescreen or it's a way to energize a very conservative base.
Professor of Politics at Claremont McKenna College, Jack Pitney, is aware that California isn't held in high esteem in much of the country. He says one can see the legislatures in other states supporting some kind of retaliatory action. Oklahoma fired the first shot. The city of San Francisco is stricter than California. Late last year, it limited city-funded travel and contracting with 22 states, including Oklahoma, for what it called severe anti-choice policies. For America This Week, I'm Rich Rodriguez.
And the number of people infected by the coronavirus continues to skyrocket worldwide with thousands of confirmed cases. The coronavirus outbreak started in China, and the first confirmed case in the U.S. was in Washington State. Suzanne Fong with Sinclair station KOMO Como spoke with restaurant owners whose family is now under quarantine in China.
The business owners tell me they are worried sick about their parents, their friends, and their family in Wuhan, China, and they want to do something to help.
It's supposed to be the start of a new year, good luck, happiness, wealth.
Jing Cafe in Seattle was closed this past Saturday for the beginning of Chinese New Year. However, owners Greg and Jing Wetzel say they're also closed for a few days because of what's happening in Jing's hometown.
My dad say he cannot contact my auntie and my uncle because they both have fever.
Jing's parents in Wuhan, China have been quarantined. Her aunt and uncle there have also tested positive for coronavirus.
My auntie say every day it's like a hospital is packed and the doctor cannot accept more patients.
The first case of coronavirus in the U.S. showed up last week in Snohomish County.
It's scary to think that it can hit so close to home.
The Wetzels hope to console their worried customers who have family in China.
I had a customer yesterday come in with the face mask on. A lot of our customers come in from the Wuhan area, either, computer engineers.
The couple is also stepping up to help those in Wuhan, China.
Because there's not enough masks to go around, some people are charging extremely high prices for them.
So the Wetzels are starting to collect supplies.
Alcohol wipes, goggles.
And face masks.
N95 is the grade that you need. they use it for painting and stuff like that.
They're looking at the bigger picture, too.
It's not just a China thing. I mean, it's everybody. We need to stop this thing as soon as possible.
The Wetzels say they're collecting supplies here in Seattle. Again, that includes N95 grade face masks, alcohol wipes, and goggles. And they plan on sending all of that back to China. In Seattle, for America This Week, I'm Suzanne Fawn. Eric, back to you.
Every week we honor first responders who died in the line of duty protecting our great country. Earlier this month, 2 officers with the Honolulu, Hawaii Police Department were shot and killed while responding to a stabbing. Officer Tiffany Enriquez was with the police department for 7 years and was a U.S. Air Force Reserves veteran. She leaves behind 3 daughters and a grandson. Officer Kalike Kamala was shot shortly after Officer Enriquez. He had served the police department for 9 years. He's survived by his wife and son. Please rest in peace, officers and families. Let's get right to our second debate, facing off analyst for Young Americans for Liberty, Emma Michelle, and political commentator Amisha Cross is back. Guys, let's talk a little bit about what we started earlier, Amisha. I'm going to start with you this time because maybe you didn't get enough opportunity to explain some of this stuff. Don Lemon, Rick Wilson, and the New York Times reporter laughing, making fun, poking fun at Trump supporters' voice, calling them kind of dumb and stupid.
Absolutely. I think that Don Lemon feels aggrieved by President Trump. He feels aggrieved in many cases because of the tweets that have come out from the president directly towards him, because of his known hate for CNN. But I don't think that we are in an era where it makes sense for journalists to attack to attack voters, to attack supporters of either political party. It's depressing in that sense, but it was also one where we saw him, and when he wasn't making those comments himself, he was actually laughing and digging in with others who were making them. I think that's
encouraging it, he was pushing it out. What do young Republican, what do young conservatives feel when they see something like that?
Yeah, well, all this does is galvanize Trump's base, because they're already convinced that the media is completely against them in every way. So when they see a clip like this, it basically just empowers them to get out and vote and get more involved. And at the end of the day, this is just going to lead to Trump supporters further digging in their narrative that the media is completely against them.
Yeah, I'm just blown away. I mean, look, the guy got, whether you like him or not, I mean, she got 63 million votes. That's quite a big group of people that you're poking fun at, making fun of the way they speak. I can't imagine what the gay community would be like, or any of the minority communities would be like, if there was someone making fun of the way they looked, spoke, or shopped.
Yeah, the issue for me is the attack on the voters themselves. If he was going to make comments about the president has more than enough reasons for Donald Trump. I mean, the president has more than enough reasons for him to be talking about him now. We're in the heels of this impeachment. To attack the voters themselves is problematic, especially since a lot of those same voters voted for Obama previously, then voted for Trump. These, again, are people who, in many cases, Democrats are trying to win back over for a November election. This does not help that case.
This has become, I don't know, sort of racist or I don't know, what do you call it, anti-redneck? I'm just trying to figure out what group is it? Is it every Trump supporter? Is it every white male? Is it anyone who's white? Who is it? Who are they making fun of?
I mean, I think it's becoming increasingly a class thing where people in middle America see people on the coast and people that live in New York City and run these media networks as their enemy and as completely different from them. And in reality, Americans have a lot more in common than they have different. But this further drives that divide, and that really makes it more difficult for voters to
cancel
reconcile.
culture, right? You guys, very quickly, less than a minute, very quickly. Cancel culture. Do these three deserve to be canceled?
I mean, I think people can speak for themselves with the ratings. Maybe if CNN wasn't doing this constantly, they would have those 62 million Americans not changing the channel all the time.
I don't believe in cancel culture at all. At the end of the day, CNN and every major network knows who their base is. Most of the CNN watchers, regular viewers, aren't people who are going to be extremely aggrieved by this, to be honest. So I definitely don't think that it's going to hurt him in the long run.
I hate the cancel culture. I hate everything about it. I think you need to get a backbone, get a thicker skin, especially if you're going to be on TV, and just man up and woman up, man. Let's move on. So what? You make fun. I'm half Italian, half Russian. Call me Guinea. I don't care. But don't yell at me if I call someone else Rick Wilson and moron. Ahead, Henry Olsen with the Washington Post joins us to talk balls and strikes. Stick around.
Cheryl Atkinson asks the tough questions.
Shouldn't those conflicts of interest have been disclosed?
And brings you the untold story.
I couldn't believe that the United States was doing this to my son.
Stories you won't see anywhere else. Full Measure with Cheryl Atkinson.
Okay, let's talk balls and strikes. He's a columnist for the Washington Post and senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, author of the book, The Working Class Republican. Henry Olsen, thank you for being here. And I guess one of the theses of your book is that President Trump is a lot like that man right on the cover of your book, Ronald Reagan, very popular president.
That's absolutely right. You know, that Ronald Reagan did what nobody thought was possible, which was get lifelong working class Democrats to cross over and vote for him. And 35 years later, who was the first Republican to do it since Reagan? It was Donald Trump. You look at a lot of places where Trump won.
What was the similarity?
The similarity is that neither of them were born Republicans. that they were both converted to being Republicans, but they had an affinity with the common man that came through in the way they spoke and with the issues that they talked about. And that's why these people flocked to Trump, why they flocked to Reagan, and why maybe they're a little warm.
Was it also that they were not political insiders? I know Reagan was the governor first, but clearly he spent most of his time prior to that on the big screen on the social.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously that had something to do with it too. You know, that Reagan was somebody who came from the outside and crusaded against Washington, crusaded against what he called puzzle palaces on the Potomac, and that had a lot of credibility with people who were fed up with D.C.
All right, you say he was, Donald Trump's a lot like Ronald Reagan, very affable. Take a look at Lev Parnas has been in the news. He claims to have been inside a lot of discussions with President Trump regarding Ukraine. President Trump disagrees. Watch.
I don't know him. I don't know Parnas, other than I guess I had pictures taken, which I do with thousands of people, including people today that I didn't meet. I don't know him at all. Don't know what he's about. Don't know where he comes from. Know nothing about him.
You know, so Henry, you spend enough time here, and I've known Trump a long time. The guy will take a picture with anyone. If you're next to him, he'll take a picture. He'll turn around, and if you watch some of the video and some of the pictures, it's not like they're whispering each other's ear. They're just kind of together with a picture.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that Trump does that all the time. Politicians do that all the time. I've got pictures with Republican presidents and Republican senators and foreign leaders. They don't know me from Adam. It was just something that we did at a meeting. We chatted for a couple of minutes, then we moved on. And so for Parnas to say, I've got this picture that's obviously something that was just done for a second, and say, well, this means I've got a great relationship with the president, he's going to have to show a lot more than that.
Was Reagan as belittled, and you know, we were showing the sound bites of the Republican and the New York Times reporter laughing at Trump supporters. Yeah. Well, did he have that kind of vitriol against him when he was president?
He had a lot of vitriol against him. I think Trump is at a new level, but that's partially because the media has lowered its standards. A lot of people who felt that way about Reagan, but they wouldn't express it on camera. Reagan,
and certainly you wouldn't have a host bending over laughing and wiping tears because he's laughing so hard about a comment like
that. No, I mean, this was also a time before cable media, that all these stations had to get federal licenses and they'd be afraid of doing something like that. But Reagan was hated, but Trump was hated at a level that is even
Tell us about,
difficult to compare.
I only have about a minute or so. Tell us about the legacy part. Okay, so Reagan leaves. He does very well. Similarly to Trump, the economy's doing great. How long before he became this mystical figure of greatness for conservatives?
Yeah, probably in the early 90s, I would say that hardcore conservatives had their differences with him, but particularly after the fall of the Soviet Union, people look back and said, hey.
So 5 to 7 years after he left office?
3 to 5 years, I'd say. By the time of Bob Dole, 1996.
Does Trump have that window, based on everything we know now after 3 and something years, to become that kind of, figure on the hill, the statuesque president?
You know, he's going to have to be able to do things more like Reagan in one way, which is reach different people. But, you know, if he wins re-election against all odds and then goes on to a successful second term, I'd never put it past him.
All right. Henry Olsen, thank you very much. Washington Post columnist. Love the Washington Post on the show. You guys come on quite a bit. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And before we go, here's something that caught the attention of America this week. Now, you know, senators are only allowed to bring 2 beverages on the Senate floor during this whole impeachment shenanigan thing: water and milk. That's it. Water and milk. This week, apparently, Senator Mitt Romney brought his own bottle of chocolate milk. Bottles are not allowed, Mittens. The milk came from Brigham Young University's creamery. BYU is Romney's alma mater. Twitter went viral of the rule breaker. He reportedly ditched the bottle in the Republican cloakroom and returned to the floor with the chocolate milk in a glass. And that's a wrap from the DC Swamp. Thank you for watching us, folks. I'm Eric Bolling. See you all next week. Bye.